Welcome to episode 137 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer-director JJ Abrams and his greater Bad Robot Universe. I'm your host for this week. My name is Marcelo Inostroza, joined as always by my fellow co-host, Matt Crandall. And on today's program, we will be talking about one of JJ's coolest collaborations in my mind. We will be talking about the 2011 film Super 8. So, Matt, will you help me make my monster movie?
I will, but let's have no real monsters show up, please. So finally, we're at, the big movie that JJ teamed up with one of his heroes to make. So we've talked about all the shit that he wrote when he was just kind of doing it for the money. And then he gets the TV stuff that he was doing for passion, and he gets to then launch a big franchise like Mission, bringing that back to life. Then he tackles Star Trek, and he brings that back to life. And then in a pre-Stranger Things world, he says, you know what I want to do is I want to make an Amblin movie. We don't make those anymore, and I used to love those Amblin movies of the 80s. Let me call up Steven Spielberg and see if he wants to be involved. And of course, Spielberg and JJ had a pre-existing relationship because, as the famous story goes, years before we would ever know their names, Matt Reeves and JJ Abrams were hired to restore and take care of Steven Spielberg's childhood Super 8 movies. JJ was always in and around Hollywood and knew like lots of people and had connections. But getting the call from your hero to work on making sure that his childhood possessions and his earliest form of creativity were preserved is a pretty huge thing. And I know that really shaped Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams' outlook going forward. So for them to then get J.J. and Spielberg together to make a movie about that thing that actually brought them together in the first place, Super 8 film, Super 8 movies, making movies as a kid, and doing it in the style of those great Amblin movies that are, fantastical, have otherworldly creatures, are grounded in the Goonies-like kid dynamic, but also has a lot at play with the family dynamic. And this being, what if Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., Gremlins, Goonies all got together and kind of had a baby, and it's just done in such a loving and carefully thought out way. I think this movie is one of JJ's best, if not his actual best film. And now that we are 12 years on from this coming out, I can't fucking believe this is the last time JJ Abrams did a completely original movie. He has not done anything other than franchise IP stuff that, I like a lot of it. But like, give me another one of these, man. I hope we can find a way back. But what do you think of when you first hear J.J. Abrams is making a movie about kids making a movie? Oh, and by the way, it's produced by Steven Spielberg.
The first time I heard about this movie, I was already in love with JJ as a creative individual, and I grew up on Spielberg movies just like you did, Matt. And when I heard that JJ was going to make a movie with Steven Spielberg, with Amblin, and what the film was about, I lost my mind. Because you guys don't understand. This movie hit me at my core in so many ways. But the place where it hit me first is because I've always wanted to have that experience of making movies with my friends. I didn't get to do that when I was a kid. And as an adult, that's what I'm chasing. So I love movies about making movies. And there's something so Goonies-like, and there's something so E.T.-like about this movie that it's so wonderful. There's a sense of magic and wonder and Bad Robot mystery box to it that I absolutely adore so much about this movie.
Yeah, that mystery box element is the thing that really feels purely JJ, and some of the, dead mom, angry dad kind of stuff seeping in. But it's funny that, this is a movie where JJ has sole writing credit. And even though we knew that Spielberg made Super 8 movies as a kid, I don't think we realized to the what extent Spielberg was definitely instrumental in coming up with part of this story. Because if anyone has seen The Fabelmans, when you realize that the first movie that Steven Spielberg ever saw, The Greatest Show on Earth, has a scene where a train derails because there is a truck on the tracks, and then Spielberg gets the model trains, and the first movies he ever makes are crashing the train. And obviously, a train crash and then making models of trains and making a recreation of a train crash is such a huge part of this movie that I'm like, okay, that can't be something that JJ didn't know about Spielberg. He had to have known that, and that had to be something that they had chats about while they were coming up with how do these kids have this interaction with this other being. And I know as much as Spielberg might have crafted the story, he also changed where it could go and where it couldn't go, because there are lots of stuff that JJ had these ideas running around, but he kept thinking like, I can't do that. Close Encounters did that. Oh, I can't end with some sappy, the kids say goodbye to the creature and they hug and then they watch the spaceship leave. That's the ending of E.T. So there was lots of Spielberg stuff that they had to avoid because this was working in such a similar mode, that it is interesting to see that marriage of the JJ aesthetic and the Spielberg storytelling aesthetic. And I think this story in particular, the fact that this movie was a hit, showed people that, other people would be able to somehow tap into that Spielberg vibe that Spielberg, even in the movies he only produced and didn't direct in like the 80s and 90s, all felt like they had. And we hadn't had that for a while. But if Super 8 doesn't happen, there's no way that Netflix goes ahead and greenlights Stranger Things without this sort of showing like this can work. People can make an homage to their hero while still making something interesting and unique in itself. And there is an appetite for that. Now, of course, in 2023, we are constantly inundated with, Amblin wannabe movies that are nowhere near as good as actual Amblin movies. So whenever this movie starts, I always get an extreme high right off the bat, where we get the Amblin logo immediately followed by the Bad Robot logo. And it's like, oh fuck, how have we not had 5 more of these since this came out? How have these two guys just like a path diverged in a wood and they've never met up again? I just don't get it. And it partly is that JJ has spent so much time in George Lucas's world that I don't think they were able to cross paths again. But now that like it's smooth sailing, like come on, get these two guys back in a room to create something. We don't need Super 9 or Super 8 too, but give me something else where we get these two guys who are so in sync working together. I think that would be incredible. But what do you think of the opening of this movie? The first 3.5 minutes are really down, somber. They tell us so much about the weight of this story that we're going to have to deal with in very effective and not like exposition dump kind of ways. So I loved the opening shot of it's been, 3 years since we had an accident at this factory to it's only been a day. And immediately we know some shit has gone down, and then cutting to, Joe sitting outside in the snow and everybody inside talking like, oh man, his dad is a piece of shit. He's not going to be able to do this. What are you thinking as that's how we open this movie, with this aftermath of a tragedy that we don't see on screen?
I absolutely love the opening to this movie because, as you said, it opens up on a factory sign that basically says, days without incident, right? And it has this long number on it, and then you see this guy put up this one on the sign indicating that an accident had just happened there. And the next thing we see is when we transition to the party, and the only thing we see is Joe sitting on a swing set outside. We go in to Joe's house and we understand that that his mom just died, and we see his friends there. And while we spend a little time with his friends, we sort of get their dynamic. Charles mentions that there is a movie happening, and then we go back outside to see Joe sort of playing with this locket kind of thing. So already just by that, we can see that he had a very close relationship with his father. I mean, with his mother. His father is a police chief, and people in the community don't think that his father is ready to take care of him because he's very, very, all about the job, and he doesn't connect with his son in the way that his mother did. And the last thing that we see is we see Alice's father pulling up to the house. We don't know what their connection is yet, but when Alice's father goes into the house, Joe basically arrests him and he says, "Jacob, I'll be back later." And then JJ does something very, very cool. He focuses in on Joe, and he focuses in on the locket, and he just has Joe close the locket. We jump to 4 months later. So I love the opening sequence because it gave us a whole lot of information, but it was nothing but visual storytelling. And that's what I loved about it so, so much. He told us a lot without telling us anything, almost.
Yeah, the kids are the only ones who give us kind of the exposition dump, but they get to do it in a way that seems natural to kids, where they're like, "Oh my God, did you hear like his mom's body got decimated and like it was disgusting, and how did they even get any remains?" Like the way that kids would. So it lets us know that there has been a horrible accident. I love that we first see Mr. and Mrs. Kasnick looking out the window, and they're like, Jackson isn't going to be able to cut this. This guy's over his head. He's barely hanging on. I think this is going to be bad. We're going to have to make sure we look out for the kid. And then having Louis Daynard show up, and we get from when he's coming in that he looks disheveled and like something has gone on, and Joe looking at him, and then obviously the way that Kyle Chandler drags him out and is like, "You shouldn't be here, you piece of shit." And at first we're wondering like, oh, was there an affair going on here? But then it becomes pretty clear that no, that accident was somehow caused by this guy's behavior, or he was the guy in charge of the safety who didn't do his job right. And for a big budget summer blockbuster to open with 3.5 minutes of mournful sorrow and death is kind of like, okay. But then luckily we cut to the title card 4 months later, which, as the trivia and the audio commentary will say, JJ didn't really think they should put the title card here, but Spielberg was like, "You fucking have to, because you got to tell the audience where and when they are so that they can then just enjoy the rest of the movie." So he's like, just put it's a few months later. We obviously know it's a few months later because the next scene is the last day of school. Everybody's getting out. It is warm. It is hot. It is summer. It's no longer winter. We're getting a raucous, 70s rock song, "Don't Let Me Down." And finally the mood is up. And we can see that obviously Joe and his buddies are still talking about this movie and getting ready to shoot the movie over the summer. And immediately we start to like all these characters more because we see how excited Charles is about making the movie and how like creative minded he is. And Joe's like, "Yeah, I guess I can help." Like, "Yeah, fine." But the second that Charles mentions that he has asked Alice to play the wife, then we see Joe and we're like, okay, this guy's got a crush on this girl, and he's going to do whatever to be a part of this because the girl he likes is part of it. And that is a very relatable thing for a lot of people watching this movie. So immediately after, the first 6 minutes, we were kind of rooting for Joe because we know his trauma origin story, and we see some of his hopes and dreams and wants. And even though he's sad, he's still just a young boy with a crush on a girl, and that's pretty relatable material. And so I like that then we go and we start to catch up where all the kids are, and we see the craziness of the Kasnick home. So we meet, Charles's sister Jen, played by AJ Michalka, and see their home dynamic as all the kids are running around. And this scene really feels like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the Neary family. If you haven't seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if you jump to a scene where they're talking about going to see Pinocchio and everybody's watching TV and having dinner, it is a fucking madhouse. It is insane. All the kids are talking over each other. Dreyfus and the wife are trying to have conversations, and everything is just happening, and that's what this scene is. And so I thought we're already getting, nods to other Spielberg movies in this Spielberg produced JJ Abrams movie, but it's working to give us a sense of the time and place. So this 1979 feels familiar by the end of that scene because we just get this down home, a busy family, and the kid who like this family's kind of looking out for, but he still feels like he can't stay for dinner. He's got to go home until he's invited explicitly. So he doesn't want to impose because he's still not, part of the family, but he kind of is.
The one thing that I really found interesting once we go into meet Charles's family, you're right, it's got that Close Encounters kind of vibe. Everything is upside down. The twins are banging on shit. The sister won't get up to go get whatever she wants to get. I believe they're arguing about sister going to Wendy's or not. I don't know if that happens later, but that's hilarious. By the way. But the thing that I love about that is when Joe and Charles are in Charles's room. Charles's room is full of posters and magazines and all movie posters, and he's got so much shit in his room. But I was also wondering, because you said that JJ sort of went out of his way to sort of steer clear of Spielberg films and Spielberg references. If he didn't do that, I guarantee you that Charles would have had like something from Spielberg in his room somewhere, because he has a Halloween poster, but everything else is sort of like out of focus. It's there, but you can't really tell what it is.
Right. He's got some John Carpenter, and there is some Star Wars stuff kind of strewn around, but on the audio commentary, JJ says, everyone in 1979 who was supposed to be a kid like Charles or Joe would have had a Jaws poster on their wall. They absolutely fucking would have, and they just couldn't because Steven was involved in the movie. And this was before Steven was willing to kind of look back on his movies in that way, which he's more open to when he directs Ready Player One and has like references to his own films in there, but not as many as the book, because he still has a little bit of sense of modesty where he doesn't want to be like the guy self-congratulating while doing this. But yeah, those kids definitely would have had a Jaws poster on their wall, 100%.
Also, the thing that I found really interesting during Charles and Joe's conversation in Charles's room is Charles is very, very bossy. He's very, very like, I'm the director. You need to listen. There's something. I love the kid. I really love the kid. But there's something like very, very bossy about him. And I love the way that Joe is sort of like laid back, sort of chill. I mean, he is the guy in the film that does special effects, sound, and makeup. But I love the way that Joe is sort of lean back and sort of chill. And Charles is the one that's is like, no, I got to get my movie made. We got to get this. We got to get this, and we got to get this. But I absolutely love the last thing that they say to each other before Joe leaves Charles's house. He says, later date, because obviously they're going to go and shoot their film somewhere in their town at midnight. And I just love that thing where to make a movie, you have to like sneak out of your house with your bunch of your friends so you can shoot some stuff when there's nobody around, which leads to one of the most amazing scenes in the movie. But the other scene that I love a lot, which is really sad, when Joe goes home, he goes into his house and he goes to the bathroom and he hears his dad crying in the bathroom. Obviously, he just lost his wife, 4 months ago, and the way that Kyle Chandler plays it by just noticing Joe there, and he doesn't like take a beat. He just says, I'll be right out, and closes the door right on his face. And the look on Joe's face of sadness and sort of like, I need you right now. I need a hug from you. But the fact that you're not able to get over your own feelings to help me, I felt really sad for both of them in that moment.
Yeah, and Kyle Chandler as the dad does his best with this material. And, if you want someone to look earnest and stern and sad, you can't do much better than Kyle Chandler, who has a way of just giving looks and acting without saying a lot that really comes across. Now, we get kind of frustrated with his dad because it's obvious to us that the kid is struggling, and the thing that will set him straight is not to push him away. It's to bring him in. It's not to send him to military camp. This will be good for both of us. Fuck you. No, it's only good for you. Like these kind of things that it's just like, oh, this is stereotypical movie dad who's making all the wrong moves because he can't deal with his grief. And so I think that Kyle Chandler does a great job with it. But as the movie goes on, every time we check in with him, it's not as exciting and dynamic as when we're hanging out with the kids. So I think he kind of has a thankless job in this movie because he's essential for the themes, and he does get some great scenes later. But I have such a good time hanging out with the kids because they're so dynamic, and the way that they make them dynamic is each one does have their own unique personality, and I like that they boil that down to their jobs in the movie. So as you said, Charles is bossy because he's the director. He's the guy with the vision. He's the one who's actually trying to make this happen. And throughout the movie, Charles gets moments where, you know, a passive kid wouldn't kind of speak up for themselves, but later his big speech about like, the reason I asked Alice to do the movie is because I liked her are such great moments that, you know, if he didn't have that bossiness to him, he would never vocalize that. But because we've established that he's the guy who's orchestrating this whole thing and he's not afraid to be a little bit overbearing and bossy to get his vision and to get what he wants, then that scene later makes sense. Joe, being the guy who's just kind of going along with this because his friend asked him to do it and he's not super invested, is kind of how we see he's kind of gliding along until Alice comes into the picture. I love that Carrie's the pyro, and he's like the loudmouth who's always calling everybody a pussy, and he's got these giant braces, and him cracking wise and just being the guy who's got a bag full of sparklers is really funny and charming, and played by Ryan Lee. Like, that's one of the characters that you're like, I knew a kid growing up who was just like that piece of shit, right? Like, I bet that guy has set himself on fire 8 times now and probably has 3rd-degree burns somewhere. But so I liked that, and that kid, you know, he's really dynamic. And whenever I see him on screen, I always just think of how great he was in Super 8. And the year after this, he would be in Judd Apatow's This Is 40. And he had a really funny scene in that movie where he got picked on by Paul Rudd. And that was because Apatow saw a rough cut of this movie and then cast that kid because JJ had showed it to him. And then we have Martin, who is kind of like the uptight one of the group. And even the role that he's playing in the movie of like uptight husband investigator kind of guy kind of reflects his actual personality as the kid. So he's like kind of the nerdy kid who doesn't really want to get in trouble, could turn into a narc at any moment, like one of those kind of kids. And then Preston is just kind of like, I hate to say it, he's like the bonus guy who's just there to round out the group because he's kind of the least distinctive of the 5 kids, but he's just there. And then obviously when Alice shows up, when they are heading to the train station to do their big evening shoot, I love that the second she sees Joe, she's like, this fucking guy, he can't come. He's a narc. He's a narc. His dad's the sheriff. He can't know that I'm here. And I love that Joe's response is not offended that Alice doesn't want him there. He goes, oh my God, you know who I am and you know who my dad is and you know all this stuff about me? And he's like flattered that Alice actually knows he exists. And that was such a wholesome, childlike moment where most people would be kind of offended that she's like, not this fucking guy. And he's like, oh my God, but she knows who I am. And that's the thing that he latches onto. So I loved that. And then, of course, the scene you were queuing up is the gigantic, spectacular train crash that happens as they are making this movie. And they are just trying to get some production value in the background of a real train going by. And it goes sideways because a pickup truck frantically drives onto the tracks, drives right into the train, derails it in a spectacular and unbelievable fashion. As JJ has said, he feels that this is the kid's recollection of how this train crash happened because he knows that in real life, cars wouldn't launch like rockets through the air and land right in front of a child before they explode 30 seconds later. But when we're making a big blockbuster movie, we want it to be exciting. And the train derailment sequence is thrilling and fun. And the sound design by Ben Burt is incredible. And the way it's all filmed is so smooth, yet you feel like you're there and you feel the chaos, but it's not Cloverfield chaos where you feel sick and you're just getting glimpses of stuff. This is, we know everything that's happening and it's smooth and it's great. And I think the cinematography of this whole movie by Larry Fong, who is not usual JJ's main guy, that's Dan Mindell, who sat out this movie, is phenomenal. Larry Fong's one of the best in the biz, and this movie looks gorgeous. I watched the 4K to do this, and it just looks incredible. But what do you think of this whole train sequence, Marcelo? I know you really dig it.
Yeah, I really, really believe that this is one of the best train sequences ever to be committed to film, other than a recent train sequence that has come out in a movie having to do that's named Mission Impossible. But the way that JJ films this train sequence, like Matt just said, it's not like Cloverfield where you're running around and you can't decide which way is up. Everything about the way that he presents the train sequence is smooth. It's clear. You are with the kids from the moment that the car hits the train. You follow Joe. You follow Charles. You follow the rest of them, and also you're worried for them because you're like, this thing is cool, but this thing is violent. I'm surprised that it didn't hit anyone while it was happening. But if I could just back up for a small moment here, I absolutely love when the kids are setting up to do their night shoot, and Charles is telling Martin that he has some new lines for the scene that they're about to shoot. And I love the way that Martin reacts to new lines. He goes, "New lines? No!" But the thing that I love about the moment so much is before they actually shoot the scene, they go into rehearsal, and they do Alice's side first. And during the rehearsal, the speech that she gives, the way that JJ pushes in on her face, and he goes from her face to Joe's face to Charles's face to Martin's face, the guy who's in front of Alice is doing the scene. But the way that Elle Fanning delivers the lines and the way that she basically has the boys in her hands without even knowing it in fucking rehearsal, I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, turn on the cameras right now. This is what you want. But it's just something so cool, but it's just something so small to show to the audience that the boys are totally enraptured with Alice and in love with Alice in that moment because of the way that she read the lines that Charles wrote.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the keys to it is Alice shakes up the dynamic and adds something unique. And I think seeing that she's kind of in awe of the situation makes us like her more and really adds something so that then when the chaos happens, we care about all these kids. And I like that, we don't know at first why this train got derailed, but we do see that it was an intentional act. And when they pull up to the pickup and the kids recognize the guy in it, we're like, oh, okay, we're getting some intrigue here. And they're like, it's Dr. Woodward. And I'm like, of course, it's an evil doctor. And he's like, you guys got to get out of here. And if you tell any about this, they're going to kill your family. And it's super jarring and it's off-putting. But as JJ has said, it gives the kids a reason to try and keep this a secret. And so it's so that they don't all run home and tell their parents, like, we were there, and then have to deal with all the fallout of their kids being at this event and the government and all that shit. So if the kids are trying to keep on the down low that they even know that there has been a train crash, it's because they think they're protecting their family by doing it. And I love, any Amblin fans will know that the guy behind the wheel who crashed the truck is Dr. Hansen from Gremlins, who is the teacher that they bring the Mogwai to, who unfortunately meets his demise when he tries to feed a gremlin a candy bar. And I think having a dude from Gremlins in this movie, I'm like, holy shit, this is awesome. We're bringing some Amblin faces back. And he makes the most of like a very small role that then feeds into the whole like military side of the story that we're going to go, because from this moment on is where we have two branches of the story. We have the kids trying to figure out, their own dynamic with them while they are still trying to finish the movie, because they are still filming the next day in front of all the wreckage, and they are still filming later. So they're trying to finish their movie, but they know that something came out of the train that was alive. And like a bunch of weird shit is going on from here on out, that they found this weird cube. There's lots of mystery box stuff that the kids know that there's something extraterrestrial or supernatural or technological going on, but they have to keep it a secret. But they also got to finish this movie because you're a kid. You're just trying to finish the thing you set out to do. And then the adult storyline is the military show up, take over the town, and the Deputy Lamb's got to figure out what actually happened here. Why would a train derailment bring such a military presence? Because this doesn't make sense unless something else has gone on here and there's some sort of government cover-up. So what are you thinking as after the big train wreck, we still haven't really seen much of the creature. There is a scene at the Kelvin gas station where we get a small glimpse in a reflection of a puddle of the monster. But even at, the 40-minute mark here, the stories are diverging. We're going like the military route and the kids making the movie, and we know that there's some sort of creature, but we haven't really seen it.
I thought that the stories diverging in between the adult story and the kid story, as you put it, was a really, really good idea by JJ, because the adult story really feeds into what people were worried about at the time. Like there's a section of the movie once the lead sheriff goes missing after the incident at the Kelvin gas station, where dogs in the town are like the whole town, all their dogs are missing. There's a car lot that gets all its batteries taken out of. The entire town goes dead of electricity for like days. So Sheriff Lamb is trying to calm everybody down, and he speaks to this one lady that says, she basically says, "You're not qualified. Where's our sheriff?" And when he tries to calm her down, she says, well, until we find out what it is, I'm blaming it on the Russians. So I think that's a really, really cool, cheeky way to sort of put us in the time period of this movie and the time that it's taking place in. But where I was most invested in this movie is with the kid stuff, because I really, really enjoyed the kids not understanding fully what's happening here, but still wanting to make their movie and finding other excuses to make their movie. Even when their camera breaks, Joe's the one that says, instead of using your camera that's obviously busted from last night, why don't we use my dad's camera, right? And then after one of the kids bolts because he doesn't want to be involved in this, Joe has to play a soldier that Charles wrote into the movie. So I really like that among all this chaos that is happening, these kids are still finding a way to make their movie.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the heart of the kids' storyline, is that drive to keep making the movie even while this stuff is going on around them. And I do like that, when we start to see that, yeah, all this electronic stuff and machinery is going missing, the dogs that have all gone missing, and as we find out at that town hall meeting, yeah, we're starting to get calls and they're all over the place. What's going on here? And the guy who's like, my CB radio, and so Kyle Chandler can tap into the military feed because they are overhearing what the military is doing. So they're talking about Operation Walking Distance. And so Kyle Chandler finds a way to kind of get in on that, pretending he has more information than he does. But I really like that town hall is chaotic, and seeing like a small town like Lillian reacting to this big thing was pretty funny and chaotic. And seeing Kyle Chandler just be so put out, like, ugh, I can't stand this shit. And I like that there's a quick shot. If you look in the background of the people at the town hall, Elle Fanning's sister Dakota can be seen for a second. And right behind one of the people who asks a question is an actor that they have styled to be a fucking dead ringer for 1970s George Lucas. And it has to be on purpose. It can't be an accident. This guy looks like if Lucas stepped off the set of A New Hope in 1977 and came to a town hall meeting and he sat right behind a person who asked a question and is directly on camera. So I have to believe that was intentional. And it's certainly fun to see, the 70s style. And as you say, them saying it's got to be the Russians reminds us of the time period that we are in as this is going down. And as Kyle Chandler tries to figure out, he's still kind of ignoring his son, and he's annoyed by the fact that the kids are carrying on making this movie. And as Joe steps into that role and they're filming outside a house that the military is currently raiding, so I love that they are using that as their backdrop so that it looks like a lot of action is happening on with the military. And Joe's lines are hilarious where he's like, I'm giving you this information about Romero Chemical, which, of course, George Romero, these kids probably love horror movies. I'm only giving you this information because we served together in Nam, and I can trust you. And I'm like, this is totally like the kind of shit that me and my friends would make, where we had no idea. Like, people wouldn't say this shit out loud, right? You wouldn't say, like, I'm only doing this because we had each other's backs that one time in the muck. Like, it's stuff that doesn't need to be said. So I thought it was funny that that's very childlike dialogue. And then Lamb is put out that his kid is doing this, and he takes the camera away and becomes an even worse dad. And he's like, enough of this childhood crap. Like, there's bigger things at play. And it's frustrating to see that happen. But then we kind of have to raise the stakes to get the kids willing to go out on a limb and go against the dad now that the dad has taken the camera away. And of course, it's kind of unclear why Alice gets taken. It's a little bit of a contrivance for the plot, but what do you think as, the kids are kind of getting shut down as Kyle Chandler is going deeper into his military thing? And I just want to shout out one of the military dudes plays the main chief on Nathan Fillion's show, The Rookie. And so seeing Richard T. Jones show up, I'm like, hey, it's that guy. He's been the chief on The Rookie for 6 seasons. So I like when you see people like before they have like their big signature role. But so the kids, like the movie gets shut down and the kids have a fight with each other and they're all mad at each other. But then Alice goes missing because the monster basically comes for her in a weird scene where her and her dad are having it out. And then she gets taken, and now it's a race against time. We've got to figure out where she has gone and rescue her.
I really think Alice being taken is just a part of the story that JJ constructed, because once they go and get Alice and once they figure out where the monster is building this thing that we're going to talk about here very, very shortly, Alice is not the only one that has been taken. The monster has been taking a whole bunch of people, and it's indicated that he eats people. So I believe him taking Alice was just him taking another food source. I don't think that he went there to go, oh, I'm going to take this specific girl, so then this could happen. I just think he did it because he happened to be there at that time. I mean, it's a little bit of a writer's convenience. I won't say that it is, but I think ultimately that's what it is. As far as the way that Kyle Chandler's character progresses in this movie, you said it earlier in our episode. He really has a thankless role because he really plays the father who doesn't understand for the whole movie. And he doesn't really get redeemed until the end of the movie. And the moment that I fucking hate, I can't stand it, is when he has that big argument with Joe in their house where he says, I don't want you to see Alice Dana anymore because his father is a son of a bitch. And he makes Joe cry. And then Joe goes to the town cemetery that's oddly in the middle of the goddamn town in a residential area. You have this like gated off cemetery. It's really, really weird. But I just hate that moment because I understand that Kyle Chandler's character is going through something, but as someone who went through loss with someone else, it took us years to get back to a sense of normalcy, and it really pissed me off when Kyle Chandler's character, I sort of feel, put his own feelings before his son's, and I don't like fathers who don't want to deal with their emotions, and I do believe that that was a character trait that JJ sort of put into this movie. Also, I feel that the relationship between Kyle Chandler's character and Joe Lamb is a nod to various other Spielberg movies that Spielberg has made in his career. Also, because all great Spielberg movies are about fathers and sons. When you really look at it, if you take away all the shiny stuff from Jaws, what is it about? A guy trying to adjust to his new life, trying to be a good parent and a good father. Close Encounters. It's a story about a dad, trying to find his place in the world that ends up he ends up going away on a spaceship, despite his family, right? So all great Spielberg movies have this family dynamic that I thought JJ brought into this movie, unbeknownst.
Yeah, they all have either a broken family trying to pick up the pieces and move on some way, or a, fathers and sons or kind of thing dynamic. But yeah, no, because even like E.T., it's about the absence of the father. It's the father not being there that makes that whole thing work. But it's the same idea, right? It's this broken family that then has to pick up the pieces. And as you mentioned, Jaws, I already talked about the town hall scene, but that reminded me so much of Brody's day-to-day in Jaws, where everybody's like, Brody, like, you gotta fix this and we gotta do this. And like the small townspeople coming up and like complaining. That's what the town hall felt like too. Like half the time when we're with Kyle Chandler, it feels like he's Martin Brody. It feels like he's doing like the boring shit during Jaws. So I think that's definitely intentional. And as we learn a lot in this movie through movies, which of course we have mentioned ad nauseum as being like a bad robot thing where you sit down and everybody watches a film. But even when Lindelof is not involved, we sit down and watch some film in this thing. So we watch some films and we find out that the reason that the military is there is because this is an alien creature that has actually been in military captivity since the 50s. He does have feelings. All the creature wants to do is rebuild their ship and go home, which is very similar to another dude who just wanted to go home. But the military would not allow it. They would not give it back its ship. They wanted to keep it for their experiments and research. And we find out that it makes connections to people by touching them, and that there is some sort of exchange of information that happens when this goes on. And we learn that Dr. Woodward was one of the main consultants with the alien, and when he touched it, he understood its plight and what it wanted. And so that's why he derailed the train, because they were not going to let the creature go. They were moving it to another secure facility, and he thought, like, enough is enough. This guy's got to just go home. Like, that's all this guy wants. And so he derailed the train, and that all of this technology that's going missing is the creature trying to assemble enough stuff to recreate their ship to then go home. And we also watched some home video of Joe when he was a baby with his mom. So this grounds us again in the loss and the trying to move on after losing someone so important. At the time, we didn't know who this was, but it's funny watching the home movies now, because the mom is Claire from Outlander, Katrina Balfe. This is her first movie. And so you're like, oh, this is just when I saw Super 8 in 2011, it was a no one, and now it's like a A-list TV star who plays the mom. So it looks like it was intentional. And that is queuing us up for the fact that in the big finale, Joe is going to realize sometimes you have to let go of stuff to be able to move on, and that letting go of it doesn't mean you're letting go of the person or forgetting what they meant to you, but forward momentum has to happen for life to go on, and that's okay. And that all coalesces when they realize this creature is subterranean. It is underground, and as you mentioned, the graveyard, they start to realize there were these weird sheds that were filled with dirt, and that this is where they can go underground. So after the kids get trapped in a war zone, the town is supposed to be evacuated. They realize Alice is missing. They got to go rescue her. They're running from house to house. They're literally like being blown up as the military is chasing this monster. And then they go underground. What are you thinking as we're going down a deep, dark hole trying to find Alice?
I really, really love sort of the third act of this movie, but if I just could backtrack for just 1 second. The scene that you mentioned when Joe and Alice are watching home videos of Joe's mom. I really, really like the moment where JJ has Alice in the foreground and Joe in the background. And Alice is basically explaining that the reason why his mom died is because Alice's dad got drunk that day. And if her father didn't get drunk, Joe's mom would still be alive. And I love the way that Ella Fanning plays it, because as she says it, I don't know if they put that shit in her eye that makes actors cry, but the way that she played this moment it was so full of sincerity and it was so full of sadness. I absolutely loved it. And I absolutely loved what Ella Fanning says and then what Joe says in return. She says, your mom shouldn't have died that day. It should have been my dad. And I know that sometimes he wishes it was too. And I do too. And Joe says something very simple. He just says, don't wish for that. You should never wish for that. He's your dad. So for me, that was like, oh, just heartstrings all around it. So I do just want to say that really quickly. But when the kids go to save Alice and they go into the underground tunnels that the monster has dug to build his spaceship together, it's a really, really great moment, because at this moment the kids get split up because Joe gets separated. And I love the moment where Charles goes, "Are you okay to do this without me?" And Joe sort of gives him a nod, and he runs off with Carrie to go and save Alice. But the thing that I love about that is this whole movie has sort of put Joe and Charles at odds, and it really has shown throughout the course of the movie. Joe has sort of separated himself from Charles, and Charles has just sort of stood there and watched it happen. But this is the moment where they go this way. It's like so I love that whole dynamic. But the thing that I love about when they go to the monster's lair, Joe is completely focused on getting Alice back, and Carrie is scared out of his goddamn mind. And even when he lights the fireworks to distract the monster so Joe can get Alice, he's like, "Where are you going?" And I'm like, dude, he's gonna go save the girl. Wake up! I just absolutely love that moment. And when Joe tries to wake up Alice, but she doesn't wake up, and he's like, "I don't want to hit you, but I gotta hit you. If I don't hit you right now, we're gonna die." So he goes, wham, and then she just wakes up, and he goes, "I'm sorry that I had to hit you, but I'm doing my best to try and save you right now." And I love the way that Alice just collapsed in his arms, and like it's just so great. I cannot tell you how great this moment is, and the little small moments that I mentioned before are.
Yeah, those are really, really good character moments as we, get our friend back. We rescue them, and I like the slap and a lot of stuff that's funny and humorous in this tense situation. And then the monster shows up, the creature. And Joe looks it right in the eyes and basically says, like, "I get it. I know what you're going through. I know all you want to do is get out of here, and like, we don't want any trouble. We just want to be left alone, and we want you to do what you got to do." So we get this creature who we haven't really seen much of until this moment, where literally Joe is looking into its face to face. The creature is designed by Neville Page, who's designed the Cloverfield monster, worked on the JJ Star Trek movies, designed this creature. How do you feel when we finally get our first full glimpse of the alien creature and it's staring Joe in the face? What do you think as we're looking right into its eyes?
I really thought that this kind of looked like the Cloverfield creature, to be honest with you. And for some reason, when it picked up Joe, I thought that it was like I thought his face was going to open up and we were going to see his bigger eyes or something like that. But that must have been another movie because that didn't happen in this scene. But the thing that I liked about it is once it picks up Joe, I love the fact that JJ focuses on its eyes and we see that we see that JJ sort of tries to make that connection with the audience that this creature is human, and the way he does that is by giving the creature these human-looking eyes. But I thought the design was okay, but again, I thought that it looked a little bit Clover-esque like, and it makes sense because you just mentioned that the guy who designed this monster also did the Cloverfield monster.
Yeah, I think body wise, it feels like the Cloverfield monster. I know this might sound crazy. Face wise, it reminds me of General Grievous from Star Wars, which is really, really weird. Like it just the coloring on its face and stuff, and the way that its eyes are. I always get General Grievous vibes from this face, even though Grievous is part mech, part person under there. But yeah, it's trying to show us in that moment that this giant alien monster can think, can feel, is not just a killing machine. And we get it pretty quick. And their exchange, him and Joe, they kind of find their common ground in that silence. And we know that the monster communicates through touch. So like they're both picking up what the other one's putting down. And then so the monster's like, okay, you guys go on your way and I'll go on mine. And then we get the big final, like all the technology is forming into this new ship, and the parents show up and Kyle Chandler sees his kid and they run. And this moment, I wonder how it played for you. It's Joe as they're watching and everything's like flying towards the ship. His locket and his mother's necklace starts to go and he grabs it. And it opens and he's kind of looking at the picture of his mom before he lets it go, right? Which is a great symbolic gesture. It's a little heavy-handed and on the nose. But then all of the junk, basically, that isn't part of the spaceship that was kind of there, explodes and turns into, like, water vapor. And then the ship, like, takes off. And so, like, part of this was, like, for fuel and just to help build the ship beneath it. I kind of don't understand the mechanics, but it's symbolic that Joe lets go of it, and we needed to know that he's going to move on and he's going to be okay. But he literally just let that locket go, and it got destroyed like 3 seconds later. What are you thinking as that kind of all plays out?
I did not like the dynamics of how this spaceship was built because first of all the cubes are introduced early on and we understand that the cubes are a part of the sort of dynamic of how the spaceship is built. But in that scene, like Matt just said, we see all this garbage and all this stuff that's stuck on the spaceship. If that's critical, that should have been stuck. That should have been sucked into the spaceship, not let go and made into vapor. And look, I understand what JJ was trying to do with Joe. The whole movie, he has Joe carry on to the locket of his mother, and in the end, he has to let go of his mother's locket. But that wasn't necessary because all the crap that the monster collected in his little secret hidey hole should have been enough for his ship. Again, I feel that the metal should have been absorbed into the ship. So you had the cubes and the metal that he collected from the town and all the batteries. By having it, released and made into this vapor water makes it kind of useless. I'm like, you could have done better than that, JJ. But also, I feel that at this point, Kyle Chandler's character is kind of useless because what he does in the third act is fine, but he doesn't like get a hero moment. Everything that happens in this movie happens with the kids, and I'm like, okay, I'm totally fine with that. I love the kids, but I feel that that JJ could have done something different with Kyle Chandler's character. Maybe have him come to this conclusion early on. Maybe been with the kids in a way. because having him show up at the end and have that tender moment with his son is great. But I feel that of all the characters in this movie, I thought you said it too. I thought Kyle Chandler got the short straw when it came to character development and character motivation in this movie. Yeah, so I mean, I love the little nod to ET at the end of the close to the end of the movie when JJ just focuses on Joe's face. It's like a Elliot kind of moment. But yeah, I love this third act, but I pretty much love everything before like the final moments of this movie. The final moments of this movie kind of don't work for me.
It to me it feels like the first hour and a half of the movie we are taking our time and we are going through everything and getting lots of the character moments, and then we literally sprint to the finish. So even though we have that nice moment with the creature underground, then especially this finale where Kyle Chandler basically just gets to say like, I got you, and that's it. There's nothing. Kyle Chandler was just running around, not actually saving the day, not actually doing much of anything. And even like a lot of the big action scenes he's not in. The kids get an incredible bus action scene that's tense and crazy before the war zone stuff happens, that, you know, like if we had Kyle Chandler along for the ride to save the day in that moment, like give him some sort of hero moment where he actually gets to do something and become instrumental, rather than I heard that in early test screenings, a lot of the comment cards were like, you guys do know that Kyle Chandler is a dipshit, right? Who like is always behind the 8 ball and just kind of bumbling his way through the movie and never actually gets to do anything cool or smart. And they tried to like fix it in post to make him a little bit less of a bumbling moron. But at the end of the day, other than the emotional stuff that doesn't really pay off in as heartfelt a way as I think it could, he doesn't have a lot to do. But I do like that as the kids are watching, you know, this creature return and we know that they're going to be okay and they're going to move on. That's fine. But we literally wrap up everything with that ship. By the time we even see that the ship is there to it being gone and the movie over, it's like 2.5 minutes. It's like so quick that I just wish that they had maybe, I don't want the movie to overstay its welcome, but I feel like we could have had a little bit more of a come down after that underground sequence to really get those family stakes pay off better. And the visual of letting go of the necklace is that literal metaphor come to life. And I like that. But then the fact that that necklace is literally destroyed with all that other junk like seconds later just really rubs me the wrong way, because he could have let us know that he had moved on but still kept this keepsake. But or just don't have it be part of the thing that then turns into all that vapor and just goes away. Have like, it would be corny to have it like, you know, become the key part of the ship or something. But just the way it is, I can't help but think like for 90% of this movie, I'm like on cloud 9 and it's a 10 out of 10. And then it's the last 10 minutes that I'm like, this kind of bumps it down to like a half a point.
Yeah. Look, the other thing that I really like in this movie, I don't think I've said it yet, but I love the relationship between Joe and Alice. Uh, um, and I love that moment at the end of the movie when they hold hands for the first time. And I understand that they're maybe like 14 or whatever. I get that. But I would have loved to seen their relationship explored a little bit more. So maybe in the come down that you're mentioning or in the epilogue, I'm not saying give us a whole another 5 minutes or something, but give us like 1 or 2 more scenes to say goodbye to everybody and kind of wrap it up. I would have loved to seen them sort of be together and say, hey, let's go out for like a burger or let's go to a movie or something. Right. Yeah, I mean, look, I enjoy this movie, but that third act, watching it in preparation for this conversation today, really reminded me of a section of the film that I think that JJ sort of lost control of the ship a little bit there, and he didn't quite land it.
The third act is the one that it just feels like they either ran out of time or money, and instead of getting to shoot like the extra 10 pages that would have really made this thing sing right at the very end. They didn't get to, but that being said, I think that what they knew was that even if you don't kind of get the exact emotional catharsis that you kind of want by the very end, we do get sent out of the theater with a smile on our face, because then we see the Super 8 film. During the credits, we see the entire movie that they made, and that's just a joy and pure fun. So I think they thought, like, we got it to the 9 out of 10. We could spend an extra 20 million to get it to a 10 out of 10, but like, we're already going to send them out with seeing the final film that's going to make everybody leave the theater on a high. So like, maybe we don't need it. And also, this is the kind of big budget movie that had a release date and was announced with a release date before they even started filming. And so like, this thing was coming out whether it was, in the best shape or not. But watching this movie, and I love seeing the Super 8 film at the end. It's so charming and so fun. Just reminds me that, like, in general, even if I have some small issues with the third act, this is what I hope for whenever a big blockbuster comes out in the summer. You want something fun, transporting, magical, with memorable characters. And this is big budget filmmaking done with such care and quality. Like, everybody from the top down, this is the whole, like, for the most part, Bad Robot A team. Our editors are, Marky and Brandon, who worked on like everything. We've got Giacchino doing an incredible score. We've got the amazing visuals. We've got Burke on as a producer. We've got like all of these Bad Robot key players to do this personal yet broad, fun sci-fi action adventure comedy that gives us the nostalgia hit of the movies we loved growing up, but is not so tied to those that we are handcuffed to the rules of their universe. And it's the kind of thing that, like I said earlier, 12 years later, how have we not gotten 4 more of these made by JJ? And I don't just mean, I don't want more Super 8s, but movies in this vein that tap into that high concept, great characters, incredible production value that just feels real and feels tangible and doesn't feel like 80 minutes of CGI in front of a green screen with 10 minutes of story, which is what we get from 90% of the movies I go see during the summer now, where it's like, oh, so they were in Atlanta for 2 months and they filmed on a green screen in a volume, and then they underpaid some CGI workers to make this look like polished turd, and we forgot to add any heart or character to these things. Okay, great. I'm glad I paid my $12 to be air conditioned for 2 hours.
Yeah, I look, after this movie, I think JJ, rightly or wrongly, got swallowed up into that big machine that we call Star Wars. And I think that really derailed anything cool or anything creative that he had in his coffers. Because Star Wars is what made JJ a household name for those of you who didn't know who the hell he was. But Star Wars is also that thing that sort of, I feel, hurt JJ's reputation.
Yeah, well, I think it was... I think the thing that made JJ the household name, other than the TV stuff, because obviously Alias and Lost did to an extent, but it was Trek. It was Trek, and the thing is that he follows up Super 8 with Star Trek Into Darkness, which I think is a fine movie that was completely mismarketed, and the mystery box thing bit them in the ass so hard that it created a lot of ill will towards JJ Abrams, which he then earned back the trust with Force Awakens. But then when people felt that they got burnt with Rise of Skywalker, it was like, I think it was the Into the Darkness combined with Rise of Skywalker, where it was like, this guy went back to the well on both Trek and Wars one too many times, because if he had just done the one that he intended to do and walked away, he would still be the #1 king shit dude. If he had just done Trek 09, Super 8, and Force Awakens, and then done anything else, fucking flawless resume, with Mission Impossible 3 being the thing before that. Like, unbelievable, 10 out of 10, no notes. But it's unfortunate that for a lot of people, Into Darkness has the same reputation. I know that, look, I'm not a person who hates Rise of Skywalker from the ground up. I think that there are incredible sequences in there. There are some of the best moments in Star Wars that they're executed at such a high level, but everything else around it lets them down. Because, we'll talk more about it when we get to it, and I don't want to start a firestorm here, but like sequences where Rey and Kylo have their Force connection and they have a big fucking battle, and the way that we are cutting from two different locations as this battle is happening in their mind, like, is some of the most exhilarating, thoughtful filmmaking in that Star Wars sequel trilogy. And like, everybody's willing to throw it out the window because of a fucking dagger that they don't like. And I agree that I don't like the dagger thing, but like, there's 40 minutes in that movie that is unfucking believable. That is JJ operating at the highest peak. But because Into Darkness disappointed, because Rise of Skywalker overall wasn't what people wanted, now everybody's like off of JJ. And I feel like if he comes back with something original, the quality of Super 8, like 2 summers from now, the dude will be back. He will be back in a big way. But if he comes back with Dark Superman or fucked up Justice League, it's not going to happen because people are going to be waiting with their knives out for him. But if he does something original, but like this, broad appeal, big thing, then I think, dust off the crown, the king is back. But we have to wait and see what he actually has planned.
Yeah. Look, for me personally, I don't want JJ to step foot into the franchise world ever again. I don't want him to do a DC movie, a Marvel movie, a Star Trek movie. For Star Wars, forget it. I would like him to do everything original, do his own thing, whatever that is, whether it's on TV or on the big screen with Bad Robot, of course. Anything that he does from now on, I would like it to come from him and not be something on pre-existing material like a Star Wars or like a Star Trek. Because I'm a Star Wars fan, but just real quickly, I'm gonna say this one time, then I'm gonna move on. The last Star Wars movie, that is the one time in my life that JJ let me down. But Matt, before we go, do you want to let the folks know where we're gonna go in the weeks to come?
So in the coming weeks, we will be shifting gears to another Bad Robot production, the miniseries 11/22/63.
All right, guys, and if you loved the show today and you want to send us comments, suggestions, or what have you, you can reach us on Twitter, formerly known or X, formerly known as Twitter, at JJUniverse815. If you want to email us with things to talk about in the future, we are at radio815 at AOL.com. But Matt, if the good folks at home want to reach you, what would be the best place for them to do that on?
On X, at Matt Crandall.
All right, guys. And if you want to talk to me, you can also reach me on X. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But until next time, as always, we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.